This is Glass City Humanist on WAKT Radio. This is a show talking about topics of the day from a secular and humanist value perspective. Here is your host, Douglas Berger.
In this episode, I talk about the current conflict in Gaza between Israel and the Palestinian people, and why I haven't really talked about it before now. Then we look at the increase in the number of people who answer none when asked about what religion they are in surveys, and how humanists should not dilute our message to attract them.
Glass City Humanist is an outreach of the secular humanists of Western Lake Erie, building community with reason and compassion for a better tomorrow. Views expressed on the Glass City Humanist are not necessarily those of Sholey or WAKT Radio.
Welcome to the Glass City Humanists on WAKT. I am your host, Doug Berger. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the big questions of the day. One of them being the current conflict going on in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas. And I have not talked about it before. I do have specific ideas about the conflict, views about the conflict. And although I do have I am a bit Jewish in my lineage. I do a lot of genealogy, so I have very strong sympathies for the Jewish people. But there's some issues that I have with the current conflict, and we'll get into that. We'll kind of unwrap all of that. The reason why it was so hard to talk about is I do have some friends who are strong supporters of Israel, and there was always the possibility I could lose friends over my views. I could be labeled an anti-Semite simply because I oppose what some of the things that the Israeli government is doing, and that's usually all my views are in relationship to. It's not Jewish people or Muslim people. It's what the political people are doing, like the government and in this case Hamas is a terrorist organization. But we'll get into all that. And then in the other segment I'm going to talk about is I had a professional development webinar the other day talking about how we could increase the number of people that join humanist groups like the one that I'm part of, the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie. And we had a Unitarian minister who was giving the presentation. And it was focused on being a church, having churchy things like rituals and singing hymns. And that stuff is great for the people that enjoy that kind of activity, but it's not something I personally enjoy doing. And it's not something that a lot of my members enjoy doing. I know I personally have a member of the group who refuses to step foot in a church. And so we'll talk about that, and because that's kind of a big issue, trying to increase membership and trying to meet the needs of people in the community. And so we'll talk about that. So I hope you enjoy this episode today. And as always, check out our website, glasscityhumanist.show, for all the information, links, and how to support the show. And enjoy.
This is Glass City Humanist on WAKT Radio. For more information about the topics in this episode, please visit glasscityhumanist.show.
Okay, in this segment, I'm going to need to talk about something that is very, very bad to talk about. Just because, we're going to be talking about sexual assaults and rapes and babies being murdered in wartime. And so I'm just going to warn you ahead of time that we're going to be talking about some heavy-duty stuff. So if for some reason you can't don't want to hear some nasty stuff or talk about war or things like that, then probably you might want to skip this segment. All right. And the reason why this is kind of hard to talk about is I had originally done a segment on this topic, recorded it, edited it, was going to do it, and then I elected not to. One of the reasons why is because, as a humanist, I want to have all the information. I want to have enough information that I can draw a conclusion, and it's going to be more or less the don't want to say correct, but it's going to be factually truthful. I'm not here to spout conspiracy theories or to repeat something I saw on Twitter X or on TikTok without backing it up. And I do that. I do that a lot. I respond a lot to newspaper websites. I make comments on some of their articles, and I verify the information before I make a comment. I want to make a well-informed comment. So I initially did a segment on this and recorded it, and eventually elected not to share it. And what it was is I'm going to talk about the latest Israeli-Hamas war. This started back in October 7th of 2023, when the terrorist group Hamas attacked several targets inside Israel, killed at least 1,000 people. The estimates are now at least 1,100 people, including women and children. They've kidnapped hundreds of people and took them back inside Gaza. And Gaza Strip is a segment. It's an autonomous area, or used to be an autonomous area for Palestinians. And I don't want to, let me just say this. If you want to find out about the history of Palestine and the history of Israel and the Palestinians and Gaza, Google is your friend. Wikipedia is okay for a start. I'm not an expert on the Middle East, but I've, in my 50s, so I know quite a bit about a lot of this history because I've observed it. And essentially what it is the state of Israel is there in what was once called Palestine. The Arabs also claim it because that was their holy area. The Israelis claim it because it's their holy area. Bethlehem is where Jesus was born, and Jerusalem is a infamous city in the Bible. And then you have the River Jordan. It just oozes biblical stories, this whole area. And a lot of the major religions, claim this area that's called Palestine. It's on the coast with the Mediterranean, and Egypt is to the south, and Syria is to the north. Syria is also another biblical historical area. And being secular, of course, the Bible is not a sectarian or religious text. It's just a book that was written by many, many people describing the events of their era. But anyway, a lot of these places are part of that. So a lot of this conflict is rooted in religion, because you have the Arabs, who are mainly Islamic. There's some up in Syria. There's some Coptic Christians in Egypt too. But the majority of the people that live in the Palestine region of Israel and Gaza, if they're Arab, they're Muslim. Sunni, I think it's Sunni Muslim. And then you have the Israelis, who are predominantly Jewish, predominantly Caucasian from the eastern blocks of Europe and other areas of Europe, and they immigrated to Palestine both before World War II and after World War II because that's their homeland. They claim it as their homeland. And because they had just experienced a Holocaust, they wanted a place that they could make their own and be safe. And they've done that. The Israeli military is one of the best militaries in the world. It's fended off invasion several times in the last few decades, and has beaten several Arab armies that wanted to stomp it out of existence. It's gotten support from most of the Western countries in the world, including the United States. The United States pours in millions and millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars in weapons, military weapons, into Israel for its defense. I fully support the fact that Israel exists. It needs to exist. That is above my pay grade. That happened way before I was born. And I don't see Israel going away anytime soon, if ever. Maybe if they all die out from old age or something like that, it might go away. But one of the problems that there is in this region, besides Arabs wanting to get rid of the Jews, is the Israeli government treating Arabs as second-class citizens. It's like, it's kind of like, that your bully is gunning for you, so you depants them or something like that to humiliate them. That's essentially what the Israeli government does to many of these Arabs. One of the things that they did was that they forced thousands of Arabs, Palestinians, into the Gaza Strip. And a lot of the human rights organizations and charities that help with the humanitarian crisis of having so many people live in such a small area that's surrounded by Israel, is they liken it to an open air prison. And so you're going to have a lot of desperate people. And when you have desperate people, they make desperate decisions. And one of those desperate decisions was supporting Hamas. Hamas came on the scene and legally became the political arm of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Before that, it was there was a gentleman named Arafat, who was the leader of the Palestinians, and his group was in charge, and they got pushed out by Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And they hoodwinked the Palestinian people, saying, we're going to help you, support you and get you food and education and medical care. Just vote for us. They voted for them. And then Hamas consolidated power, got rid of the dissidents, and purged the government of people that didn't support them. And then they started buying guns and arms and rockets and started building tunnels and et cetera, because their only goal is to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. And so that's what led to the October 7th attack. It was well planned. They trained for at least a year. There's reports that the Israeli intelligence had information that they had been planning this for at least a year, probably more than that. And they surprised Israel. I didn't believe it myself, because Israel's intelligence agencies are some of the best in the world. You have their internal security, Shin Bet, and then you have the well-known intelligence agency called the Mossad. And you would think that if they caught it, if they got wind of it, they would have taken care of it. It seems that they did not have any information about it, even though a lot of Israeli military leaders did know about it, and they dismissed the reports because of how they're treating Arab people. They didn't think that Hamas was capable of doing what they ended up doing on October the 7th. And in fact, the plans that had been obtained prior to the attack, they followed them almost to the letter. And so a lot of the intelligence community in the Middle East was shocked that this little terrorist group, and it's not a little terrorist group, especially if you believe some of the rumors that they're receiving funding from places such as Syria and Iran, that they could carry out these attacks, these brazen attacks, and do that. So that took place on October the 7th. Then, of course, Israel's going to retaliate. And their plan was to wipe out Hamas completely, which I don't fault them for that. You know, if a terrorist organization attacks you, your response is to attack the terrorist organization and get rid of it so it can't hurt you anymore. Well, Hamas was so ingrained in the Gaza Strip that Israel had to invade the Gaza Strip. And not only did they invade the Gaza Strip, but their military decided to bomb the crap out of the Gaza Strip and bomb it back into the Stone Age. And they have, at this point, the Israeli military has killed far more civilians and children and women than died during the October 7th attack in Israel. You know, I know some of those religious people like to do that eye for an eye thing. You know, you kill one of mine, I kill one of yours type thing. Well, this is way off the chart. And one of the arguments that people that supported Israel's response was making was that they claimed that Hamas was using rape as a weapon of war, that these masses of men were going around and raping Israeli women and chopping off babies' heads and stuff like that. And content creator Rebecca Watson had a video up the other day talking about this, and she titled her post "Feminists versus Israeli Disinformation: The New York Times False Rape Narrative." And basically what Rebecca does is lays out the fact that everything that we heard about Hamas using rape as a weapon was more than likely false. It was propaganda, disinformation from the Israeli side to make the Hamas attack worse than it was. And so Rebecca talks about, she writes, back in December, feminists came under attack from the likes of Sheryl Sandberg, former chief operating officer of Facebook and famed proponent of solving sexism by adjusting the tilt of your upper body. Sandberg spoke in front of the United Nations to condemn Hamas's use of sexual violence as a war tactic, as the CNN reported at the time. The previous month, the New York Times reported that Israeli police officials shared more evidence on Tuesday of atrocities committed during the October 7th Hamas-led attack, saying they had collected testimonies from more than 1,000 witnesses and survivors about sexual violence and other abuses. At a news briefing, the police chief showed videos from body cams, slain terrorists, surveillance footage, crime scene photographs, a video of an Israeli woman who said she had seen Hamas terrorists gang raping a young woman. It was really horrific news. And of course, so why weren't feminists rushing to condemn Hamas's actions? Silence is complicity, Sandberg said on stage in December. And in the face of terrorists, we cannot be quiet. This is why we're all here today to speak about unspeakable acts. Then New York Senator Christian Gillibrand took the stage and did the same thing. Talked about how the feminists didn't say anything about it. And she said, where's the solidarity for women in this country and this world to stand up for our mothers and sisters and our daughters? Then Hillary Clinton joined in, calling on the global community to respond to weaponized sexual violence. There can be no justification and no excuses, Clinton said. Rape as a weapon of war is a crime against humanity. So this was pretty much in December. The attacks happened in October. And the New York Times published an investigation into Hamas's use of sexual assault entitled the piece Screams Without Words. Well, it turns out that that Times article and a lot of the information about Hamas using sex as a weapon was false. It was based on false testimony and outright fabrications. And, I urge you to check out Rebecca's video on her channel, because it's very enlightening. And so what I want to also point out that she said that Rebecca writes, she says, but as we cried over 40 babies who never existed, within that week, Israel had murdered 724 Palestinian children. By the end of November, Israel had murdered an estimated 5,500 Palestinian children. And while the IDF, the Armed Forces of Israel, still refused to share video or other evidence of the 40 decapitated babies, video was readily available to show 5 premature Palestinian babies who were left to die and decompose in Al-Nazar Hospital after the IDF, according to a nurse with Doctors Without Borders, forced doctors to abandon the hospital, but assured the medical staff that they would take care of the patients. Despite a whole lot of evidence for this act, including the videos and the reports from the medical staff, confirmation from forensic pathologists, and additional reporting from a journalist who visited the hospital to confirm that the corpses were still there, the IDF ironically had this to say, quote, these allegations are not only false, but also a perverse exploitation of innocent lives used as tools to spread dangerous misinformation, unquote. Every accusation a confession, it seems. But that's the main point that I want to talk about when we're talking about the Israeli-Hamas conflict right now. Is, yes, Hamas, the terrorist organization, attacked Israel on October 7th and killed at least 1,100 people. That's the estimate. The current estimate that is been pretty much verified so far by Israeli authorities and international agencies. The Israeli Defense Forces have killed 5 times that number, and the number of dead is going up as the conflict continues. People are calling for a ceasefire. I would like to see a ceasefire because you're talking about a military action against an irregular force. And all you have to do is look into our history, the United States history, particularly of Vietnam, where a military action against an irregular force, it doesn't lead to happy times for that military, and especially the Israeli Defense Forces and people in the current Prime Minister Netanyahu's government talking about it. They're going to clear out Gaza completely. That's some of their goals. That's what they've been talking about, clearing it out completely and getting rid of Palestinians. Like, not just moving them. It appears that they're killing them. Now, I don't know if that's like a government thing that they've all agreed to do that, but that is what's happening. As the Israeli military punishes the entire Gaza Strip because a terrorist organization used it to attack Israel. How fair is that, really? So, that's why I wanted to record this segment and talk about it. That, when you're talking about justice, I don't see justice in this situation. I personally have always believed in the two-state solution because, like I said, Israel's not going away at any time. But treating the Arabs as second-class citizens and putting them into a small segment of land that is no better than an open-air prison is inhumane and dehumanizes the Palestinian people. And I think that is wrong. Using your military force, they have attack helicopters, drones, missiles, the whole shebang coming from the United States. They could kill those people many times over, and they are. That is not justice. That is revenge. And that is just as wrong as the Holocaust.
This is Glass City Humanist on WAKT Radio. For more information about the topics in this episode, please visit glasscityhumanist.show.
As you may know, if you read my biography or check out the website for this show or check things out, you'll see that I am founder and president of the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie and have been since I founded the group in 2018. And one of the things that I am tasked to do is professional development is what they call it, the fancy term. And basically what I do is I participate in like webinars and then I read articles and look for ideas, programming ideas, how to better expand the group and my knowledge of humanism and humanist values and how I can teach that to other people. It takes quite a bit of my time. The other day, I participated in a webinar that was hosted by the Education Department of the American Humanist Association, which our group is a chapter of. And it was a free webinar, and I appreciate these webinars. I'm glad that they host them. I'm glad that they're free. That's always the best part, because they're free. And they give good information and things to think about. And, I have my notes and take notes and participate when they allow participation. And so they had this webinar the other day called Practicing Compassion in Community. And what interested me about this was the blurb that they wrote for it. It says, join us for a conversation about how we might create more compassionate communities within the humanist movement. Too often those drawn to our communities are dealing with unprocessed religious trauma, anger toward religion writ large, or expect others to have the same ways of expressing their humanism. How do we make space for newcomers? How do we hold ourselves to a standard of personal development that includes the ability to be more compassionate to ourselves and for one another? Not only does this type of engagement help us live more within our values, but doing so can lead to the growth of our communities as well. And I was like, that's right up my alley. That's things I want to know about. How can I create a more welcoming environment for newcomers that show up to our meetings and our events? And the speaker, the person that was presenting this information, was Reverend Kevin, I'm going to mispronounce his last name, Jagoe, Jagoe. He is a Unitarian minister, the Bucksmont Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. And so he lives outside of Philadelphia. And he went through all the steps. He got his Master's of Divinity at Meadville Lombard, and he's working on his Doctorate of Divinity at United Lutheran Seminary. And he's helped out with the Humanist Studies program for the AHA, serves on the Education Committee, and he's a past board member of the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association. So he does have, and he also has a BA in Anthropology, Criminal Justice, Forensic Science. So he's got the receipts, he's got the goods, he can talk about this information. So I had no problem with that. And so how he started out and I want to stress right now that this is not like a major criticism of this webinar. I'm just expressing my observation of this webinar and how it does or does not fit into the way that I operate, the way that I do my group and things. And so I just want to, like I said, like I wrote a note to the HA. I said, I appreciate you having these webinars. He does give some great information. It's just, to me, it just seemed a little bit off, and I'll explain. So he starts off the presentation by showing some numbers, showing the one of the things that the AHA and some other free thought groups they harp on is the increase in the nuns. And the increase in the nuns are the people who, when they're asked, when they're surveyed, choose no preference. Or they might choose atheist or humanist or agnostic, but a majority of those people that are called nuns choose no preference when they're asked what their religion is. And the nuns are a very sizable portion of people these days, even bigger than some of the mainline religions now, percentage-wise, in the United States. I'm talking about in the United States. And so the reason why groups like the AHA trumpet this information is because them's our people. Those are the people that we want to try to attract to humanism. And so, because they don't have a religion, they're more than likely supporting social justice issues and less likely to support breaking down of the wall between church and state, that sort of thing. So they're pretty much kind of have some of our values, and those are the people, that's our demographic that we want to try to attract. Okay. Well, the other numbers that he was talking about too is that the mainline religions, the formal religions, are losing people, and they've lost people over the years. The numbers that people are attending church is down, etc. So this Kevin Yago, I'm gonna mess him up. I apologize. I probably should find out how to pronounce that name. So I'll just skip that part. I won't say his name. I'll just call him the presenter. So the presenter is, given these numbers, and he's talking about how the gist of it is that atheism, agnosticism, and humanism aren't growing as much as the people who answer the religion surveys with no preference. And he talks about being compassionate and welcoming to people who might be interested in humanism, but maybe they are taking a different path or using different words. I agree with that so far, because that's the way that I typically run our group, Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie. I don't care if you're even a priest, in the Catholic Church. You can come to my meetings, or not my meetings, but you can come to the group meetings. I don't have a problem with that. And this is what the view that I expressed during some of the participation part of this webinar was. I don't care if you're a priest, okay? As long as you support the values and the mission of the group, you can participate as much as you want. What you can't do is proselytize to the group. I discourage and I don't encourage apologetics. Where people talk about, well, religion has some good qualities. Our focus with the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie is no religion. You don't have to be an atheist. You can be an agnostic. You can be a nun. You can have no preference. But the primary function of our group is to support non-theism. Okay? So, for this presenter, I'm on board with that. You might get somebody in, and then they're talking about religious trauma. I'm always on the lookout for that. I'm sure that there's some people that join because they had a bad experience in whatever religious group that they were in previously. And, I'm always trying to identify that and help with that. So then the conversation goes along. Oh, and the other thing that I mentioned too, because he also alluded to younger people not being interested in church. He's a Unitarian, so he's talking about church. Being coming into Unitarians or being a humanist, or they don't like labels. That's what he said. Younger people don't like labels. And so I explained to, I also said, because I've talked to some people in their 20s about, why don't they come to meetings and things like that. And I explained that younger people form ad hoc groups depending on what the situation is. If they're protesting, I don't know, Israel's bombing of Gaza, they'll form a group. If they want to celebrate the solstice banquet, have a solstice banquet somewhere and gather at a restaurant, they'll form an ad hoc group, usually on social media. It's just a lot of younger people shun organized things. They just do. That's just something that they avoid is organized groups for whatever reason. A lot of times it's because we're not meeting their needs that they think that they have. And that was something else that the presenter talked about. He said, in order to grow our groups, we need to be providing whatever is missing in a person's life. Now, of course, him being a Unitarian minister, a lot of the stuff that he was talking about that they're missing in their lives is stuff that is provided at a church, either his church or non-denominational church or whatever, like Sunday services or counseling for religious trauma. And that's when I got off the bandwagon, because I personally believe you do not need a church. You do not need a minister, a professional minister who's been certified. You don't need to meet on Sunday. There is no hard and fast rule that if you're having a group that you have to do certain things. And what's kind of ironic is, the presentation, the start of the presentation, he was talking about, that people are going to have different ways of thinking and using different words, and we need to be welcoming. But then he says you got to have a church, and what that did was that reminded me of an argument. I wouldn't call it an argument, disagreement. Argument means that there was like animosity. It wasn't any animosity. It was just a general disagreement. And I believe it was with James Croft, who formerly was the leader at the Ethical Culture Society of St. Louis. And now he moved back to his native England and is a chaplain for a university there in southern England. But he was working with Greg Epstein, who was, I think he used to be the chaplain at Harvard. I think he might be the chaplain at MIT. I forget. It's been hard keeping up with him because we have a lot of disagreements. But anyway, he was working with Greg Epstein, and they were going to write a book. I don't know if they ever did or not. I should check with James. But they were going to write a book. And so what they did was they traveled through different areas of the country one time. I think it was over a summer or something like that, visiting different humanist groups. And the conclusion that they came to was that humanism needs congregations. I don't agree. It's hard enough to getting people interested to coming to your meetings, but then you put on top of that you got to have a building, you got to have a mortgage, you got to have maintenance, you got to hire staff. That's a lot. That's a lot to have to take care of. And if you have people that are kind of flirty and flit in and out of your events and meetings and things like that, that's just really hard, And that's the thing. It's like, that's the old way. The old way is you have a building, you have a professional staff, you collect donations and have a foundation, and you support the community that way. The presenter at this webinar, Reverend Kevin, was talking about how, you got to have resources and deal with, loss of a family member, or birth thing, or things like that. He talked about rituals. You got to have rituals. Yeah, people like rituals. They're good. I know in our group we try to have rituals. One of them is our pre-Thanksgiving social that we have on the day before Thanksgiving. Hard to get people to come to it, because people have other things to do. That's the thing. It's the landscape of time sinks in people's lives is immense. People have limited time, and they're going to want to do something that makes them feel good and that they have a good time doing. One of the recent events that we had is we had a soup and salad event at one of our members' houses. And people brought in a soup or a salad. Everybody had a good time. I know Reverend Kevin during the webinar, he was talking about that their church, they do one-off programs, and they charge money for them because he's got a mortgage. Well, I don't know if he has a mortgage, but he's got to get paid. He's got a staff that needs to get paid. They have maintenance on their building. They got to have money coming in all the time. They're dependent on that. A group like mine, where we don't have a formal place, which I would like a formal place, if anybody has anything that they want to donate, just to have a singular location to have meetings at every month, I would love that. Anyway, but because the Unitarian Church has all these obligations, then when they have their one-off activities, they charge for them. That's an idea, but it would have to be something really, really good, or maybe something that's going to cost us money to do. Like, I've been wanting to do, have people at an escape room, and that's like $30 a person, and that's not something that our group could finance. So if we do that, and I'm still thinking about doing it, we would have to have people buy tickets for it. But that money wouldn't come to us. That would pay for the event. And it's not about. I kind of worry about trying to make a profit on something, because when I was in part of a Columbus group 20 years ago, we used to have a winter solstice banquet every year. And it was fine dining. We had it catered, white tablecloths, china, the whole deal. And we would charge $20 or $30 a plate. And when we initially started to do it, it was a fundraiser. So we would charge, $20, $35 a plate. It might cost us maybe $10 to $15 a plate, cost-wise. And so we would get the remainder of that back. Well, as we did it and through the years, the cost of providing it increased to such an extent that we couldn't then charge people more and more money. So while the ticket stayed $20, $35, and some of them were free because we had people that donated tickets for people that couldn't afford it, the profit margin shrank to where it was no longer a fundraiser. We couldn't do it as a fundraiser. We barely broke even. Most years we had to pay out of our operating fund, but people expected it and people thought it was a fundraiser, no matter how we advertised it. So that's why I shy away from charging people for stuff. Like I said, it's got to be something very special. Maybe if we had a speaker come in, a famous humanist speaker come in, and we rented out a hall somewhere for them to talk, we would charge admission to help defray the cost, but it wouldn't be about making a profit. I mean, we're a nonprofit organization. But anyway, so to get back to this webinar, Reverend Kevin talked about finding out how to fill these missing parts. The other thing is our group has on our website, we have a list of resources for people for different things like mental health, food, social service agencies that they can contact if they're struggling. We do that. He seemed to think that we had to have a professional celebrants to do ceremonies and things like that. And I'm telling you, you don't. We're humanists. We don't need to do that. I always have this idea that we're harping. Some people are harping on the church model. Unitarians come from a Protestant religious background. That's where Unitarianism started, and then they evolved into. They don't have a creed or anything like that or a dogma. They accept all people, and that's basically what he was saying, is that we got to drop the labels and we got to accept everybody. I disagree with that. Labels can help. I have a certain set of values that I express and that I work to maintain. I have a set of values, and those values have a label, and it's called humanism. When I was down in Columbus in the 90s, and we were had some people from the Unitarian Church in our group and things like that, they were talking about building a bigger tent, how we had to accept everybody no matter what they believed and who they were. And again, I disagree with that. And I'll tell you why. I know it makes it sound like I'm being bigoted or that I'm trying to be a gatekeeper or something like that. And the main thing is, I don't feel that a group like mine has to be something for everybody. There are plenty of groups, like if you want to, if your favorite thing was going to church with grandma and grandpa when you were a kid and singing hymns and having the coffee hour afterwards, but you don't believe in God anymore, I've got the perfect place for you. And it's not the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie. It is the Unitarian Church. And I've done that. I've recommended things, the Unitarian Church for people that are looking for that church experience, but without the God and without the dogma. Perfect. I love Unitarians. I get them. I'm not one. Never could be one. That's a different story I'm not going to get into today. It's more doctrinal issues. And so that's why I disagree with what Reverend Kevin was talking about, his conclusions. He was talking about being a church and that we need to have rituals and counsel people and things like that. And I was like, well, we kind of don't. Humanism, you can be a humanist anywhere. You can do it anytime, however you want, as long as, and as I put it during the webinar, was, we travel on different paths. I get that. I agree with that. There's not, the path that I came to humanism isn't the same path that you might come to humanism. I get that. However, we do have a group of shared values, and we also have a shared outcome, where we want to be, where we want to get to. So it doesn't matter what path you take as long as you get to the same place. And I don't believe like I said, the disagreement I had with James Croft and Greg Epstein is we don't need a humanist congregation. That's not going to grow humanism. These people that have the old stodgy churches, they're losing people right and left because they're dying off. Young people aren't coming. They're not coming anymore. We just had another church issue come up here in Toledo with a church that was closed by the diocese, and the people in the neighborhood want to buy it because it's their cultural center or whatever they call it. And they don't want it to close. The diocese is going to tear it down, and they don't want it torn down. To me, it's just a building. It doesn't mean anything to me. It might have some historical aspects. Maybe the Pope spoke there. Or maybe it was the first Catholic church in Toledo. It wasn't. But, find a reason to keep these old stodgy churches. Oh, the other thing that this discussion reminded me of, when we're talking about doing different words and everything, was 20 years ago, roughly 20 years ago, probably 23 years ago, I was in Los Angeles for the AHA conference. They were meeting at a hotel near LAX. And one of the agenda items was they were considering a draft of what became Humanist Manifesto 3, the aspirations, the current summary of humanist values that the AHA supports. That's currently, but at this time it was a draft version. And so I signed up for that workshop. Well, it was a workshop. Yeah, it was a participatory workshop where you looked over the draft and made comments, and they had the committee, the manifesto committee, and you could talk to them and everything. All right. Well, I was probably the youngest person in the room, and this was 23 years ago. I was in my 30s or something like that. Yeah, I was in my 30s, and most of the people in that room were not in their 30s. They were older, much, much older, because that's organized humanism for you. A lot of older people, okay, because we have a problem with getting younger people. That's why I really appreciate the Secular Student Alliance. They do a lot of good things of getting younger people involved in free thought and humanism. Anyway, so I'm in this workshop, and they're taking comments from the audience, and a majority of the comments were people complaining about the title. Believe it or not. Because the draft title was Humanist Manifesto 3. Aspirations, blah, 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 whatever the title is now. But they were going to preface it with Humanist Manifesto 3 because the original Humanist Manifesto from the 30s was called Humanist Manifesto because it was the 1930s. Look up Karl Marx and communism and stuff like that. You'll get why they used manifesto. And then the second one in 1973 was called Manifesto 2. Electric Boogaloo. No. I'm sorry, that's an old joke. So then, 2001, they were going to do Manifesto 3. And a majority of the comments complained about the title. And why do you think that they complained about the title? Because they were worried that people were going to think that humanism or organized humanism, American Humanist Association, was communist. Because we used the word manifesto. Now, me, being a 30-year-old in a post-Cold War era, because the Cold War had just ended, 3 or 4 years ago, officially ended, I did not see a problem with using manifesto at all. It was an appropriate word. It didn't have the connotations. I didn't believe it had the connotations. Only somebody that lived through the Cold War and through communism would believe that it stood for communism. So that's what happens when you have a group where you use different words or express your values in different ways. It can cause problems, and it did. And they ended up dropping that part. They still used it in the blurbs when they're talking about it, that it was the third manifesto, but that was not the official title. And because enough of the people were old enough to complain about it that they decided to drop it. I disagreed, but I'm only one vote. But anyway, so to get back to this webinar, I do believe that it is an issue to draw in new people into the group. I fully believe that. And I know our group, Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie, we're trying to do things that are different. I'm open to new ideas. If somebody is very interested in our group, but we're not doing something that you want to do, reach out to me. I'm more than willing to let you host something or set something up that you want to do that we're not doing. Whatever it is, pretty much whatever it is. I mean, we would still have to look at it and make sure that it fits our values and our mission and things like that. I'm open to anything. And I think that's the takeaway that I take from practicing compassion in the community, this webinar, was you have to be open to everything. You don't have to be so open that your brains fall out, okay? Don't use labels and don't call it atheism and stuff like that. It's hogwash. If you want to call yourself a Quaker and come to my meetings, I don't have a problem with it. If you want to call yourself a Rastafarian, I don't have a problem with it. Just so you know that I'm a humanist. This is a humanist group. And humanism means a certain set of values that we express and things that we support, like social justice issues. If you can do that, you can be part of the group. We'd love to have you.
Thank you for listening. For more information about the topics in this episode, please visit glasscityhumanist.show. Glass City Humanist is an outreach of the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie. Showley can be reached at humanistswle.org. Glass City Humanist is hosted, written, and produced by Douglas Berger, and he's solely responsible for the content. Our theme music is Glass City Jam, composed using the Amplify Studio. See you next time.